So I'm Josh Baer, and I'm going to talk a little bit today about my laptop is dead to me, and I'm never going to buy one again. I gave a talk earlier this year at Ignite Austin about why my gas car was dead to me. I'm never going to buy a gas car, so this is starting to be a little bit of a theme. But thank you all for coming out. How many of you have an iPad? Oh, so you guys are all fanboys. This is like, it's preaching to the choir here. You're already drinking Kool-Aid. All right, well, about half the people raised their hands. So many of you are going to be familiar with what I'm showing here today. I don't know if you'll learn anything or not. You can leave now if you really want to. Otherwise, hopefully you'll get some out of it, and I think there'll be room for some discussion at the end. Maybe we'll all add to it. Let's give it a little time. Okay, so that was my laptop. It was a MacBook Air. It was really great. It was one of the first ones that came out. They just came out with the new ones, and I drooled over those a little bit. But I'm not going to get one. Actually, I'm definitely not, because I'm just done. I'm done with laptops. I don't need one anymore. I really don't want one anymore. As much as I like the eye candy of cool technology, I've decided I'm there. Less is more. And I'm really happy with my iPad. And so I've replaced that with an iPad. I have one of the 3G ones, so it's got the internet. It's got internet access all the time, which is really helpful. And I use it for everything I used to use my laptop for. Now, one of the things is people use all this stuff differently. People use laptops differently. Some people, their laptop's their only machine, and that's not my case. That's not me. And so if you're only gonna have one kind of device or computer, then this probably doesn't apply. I've got a really nice desktop computer at my house and at work, and so it's not that I'm saying I'm not gonna ever use a computer again. I'm just saying for me and the way that I use my laptop, I don't need a laptop. So I was very fortunate that I had a desktop computer and a laptop. And so if I'm gonna go sit down for 4 hours and type up some really long thing, I would go do that at my desktop computer typically. And for me, my laptop was primarily used for travel. It was used for going to meetings and taking notes when I'm in a meeting or looking things up. It was used for casually doing things like maybe sitting on the couch and doing something with my laptop or things like that. And for those things, that's where the iPad's completely replaced it for me, and I think opened up some new doors too. So what's the difference between, or the important differences between an iPad and a laptop? Well, obviously, I think the biggest one is one's touch-based and one's cursor-based. To me, that's the big difference. The big thing that changed everything about the laptop is really having a different interface, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. There are a lot of things that are different. Form factor is one of them. The iPad's technically smaller, but as we've seen, laptops are going to keep getting smaller. So I don't think that as a big, long-standing difference. Size is going to be less and less of an issue, but it's really the way that you interact with it and the way that it works. The apps are part of that too. All the apps that you use on an iPad right now come from this idea of being an app for your phone. That's like the way they're designed. And so when you design an app for your phone, it's typically designed to be something that you can use very, very quickly, that doesn't have nearly as much state. It's designed for opening it up, doing something quickly, and often putting it away, and just really focus and getting to the business of what you're trying to do. Due to the various technical and then just kind of practical limitations, it ends up being a lot more focused. There's less multitasking. You end up focusing on one thing you're doing, and part of that's driven by the screen size being smaller, and there's a lot of other factors that can contribute to that. But typically, the iPad and iPhone are going to be much more for multitasking versus a computer where you might have 4 screens and a whole bunch of things open at once and a lot of different things that you're doing. Battery life, this is another technology thing that'll probably, obviously will become less of a differentiator over time. Right now, the battery life, due to some of the limitations as well, is really, really long on an iPad. It lasts about 10 hours. And that's, there's a key difference between 5 to 6 hours and 10. Because 5 to 6, you're charging sometime during the day. It's like having, using your cell phone half the day and then going to find somewhere that you have to go plug it in. With 10 hours, pretty much never run out of battery on the iPad. If you're having a really hardcore day where you leave at 4 in the morning and you're traveling all day and work till midnight, then maybe you do need to plug in. But a lot of the times, just in normal usage, you can pretty much use it all day, and by the end of the day, it's still going to have some battery left, and you'll be in a really good spot. And that contributes towards this, I'm going to carry it around, use it whenever I want, not have to think about things like battery. The wireless internet really adds to it. It's another technology difference. Obviously, I'm still kind of surprised that the MacBooks don't have this yet, and they clearly could. But right now, that's just one less thing I got to deal with. One thing that makes it even better for travel, and it means that I'm just always on the internet, assuming I have AT&T coverage. So one of the things I didn't put there was a keyboard. How many of you that have an iPad ever used it with an external keyboard, a Bluetooth keyboard? Not nearly as many. Not most people don't. It seems like I do. I have one. I don't use it that much, but fundamentally, it's not it's not a limiting factor. Like you can use a keyboard with an iPad. Any Bluetooth keyboard will work. When I travel, I usually throw one of these in my backpack, and I've got it. So and I find that I barely ever use it. It tends to be in my hotel room at night when I'm like, I know I'm going to sit down and do 2 hours worth of email. I'm going to crank through a bunch of stuff. And so, okay, it's worth pulling out the keyboard and doing that. But most of the time, given the trade-off of having something nicer to type on or having to carry the keyboard and deal with it or pull it out or anything, I usually end up deciding not to do it and still typing on just the built-in keyboard. But it is, I don't consider that to be really one of the core differentiators, which I think a lot of people that initially approach it from the laptop perspective do. They think, oh, I need a keyboard. Well, you can have a keyboard with it if you want. The big benefit is usually using touch apps that were designed not to need a keyboard, and some of the benefits come from that. So what's it good for? And I'll probably open this up to you guys a little bit too, since so many of you guys have them. I'd love to hear from you. But for me, first of all, like I mentioned in the beginning, a core different thing for if you're going to be looking at an iPad is, for most people that are tech savvy, it's not your only machine. You're going to have multiple devices. Like my mother-in-law really just does email and photos and a few other things, and she might get by just fine with just an iPad, and it might be better for her unless she has to deal with, unless it can break, and I could see a lot of benefits for there. But for a lot of us that are more tech savvy, I think you're going to want multiple devices if you're going this way. If you're just going to have one device for everything, a laptop's totally still the way to go, and a great solution today. The iPads are great for browsing the web and doing email and doing interactive stuff. They're great for sharing. It's great when you're trying to show something to someone. If you're giving a presentation or you're going to lunch with somebody, the difference between having a laptop at a dinner table versus an iPad is it's a whole different world. A laptop is very kind of anti-personal. It's good for privacy because it's hard for people to see what you're doing. It's this big thing when you put it up between two people. It's like a wall between you. It's just like the body language of a laptop is not a sharing type thing. If someone wants to actually type on the laptop while you are or see the screen, they're pretty much sitting in your seat and getting really close to you, which could be good, but for most situations isn't what you're necessarily looking for. With an iPad, it's really different. You have this thing out in front of you, and everybody can kind of see it from every different angle that you're at. And you can put it right between you, and you can both point at it, and you can both tap on things and move things around. And it really just is a much better experience for sharing things, for talking about things, for brainstorming. And then some of the apps now are coming out where there's two sides to them, almost like when you used to play Pac-Man at the little table and you could sit down on each side of it and play. It's like you can both sit in an iPad, and I saw there's a great little piano app with where you can play a duet, and you put the iPad down between you and you each play on each side of it, or games that do that, or other things. It's a great media device. In a lot of those other factors that we talked about make it better than a laptop for watching movies, for doing these other things. The fact that its battery lasts a really long time, that it's instant on, that it's so small, that it's so light, that it doesn't flip open and have the keyboard or didn't have that structure. All those things make it a lot better. An iPad's not good for programming, at least not yet. Maybe once they invent some really cool visual programming thing that you can drag around. But right now, programming is really text-based. It's a lot of typing. So, okay. And it's good to have a really big screen and lots of stuff you want to move around. And yeah, it's probably not a good full-time programming device. You want to have a laptop or a full-time machine. Photoshop's not there yet. I think it could be someday, again, with touch interfaces. But, if you're a pixel pusher, if you're really doing detailed design work and this isn't going to replace that. It really sucks at working offline. There are some apps that are well designed for it, like Dropbox and things that sync things locally. I love an app called Read It Later or Instapaper that I use to get stuff cached on my machine. But I'm amazed how poor email works offline. You have your most recent 200 emails or something, and you can't get past the old ones, and it sometimes it'll delete and sometimes won't. And But you combine that with the 3G wireless and the fact that more and more of us are online most of the time, and now they even have Wi-Fi on planes. And how often am I actually offline? It's really not very often. So for me, that works pretty well. But if you're going to be off in some remote place all the time, sitting down for 4 hours doing a bunch of work, maybe this isn't the right. I mentioned before, kind of privacy. I was sitting in the beta summit, and I was paying attention to the presentations, but I also am closing on a house tomorrow, and I had to send a bank wire today, and so I did it from my iPad, which fortunately Chase has this really great iPad app, and I could open it up and I could get in and I can send a wire, and it was really easy, except I had to type my bank password. And I'm like sitting in a really crowded room, and there's like someone on this side of me, someone outside of me, someone behind me, and there's people walking around, and like I don't think any of them are trying to steal my bank password, but I really didn't want to go like type in my bank password right there because everybody can see everything that you're doing. So I had to get up. I actually got up and left the room, and like walked outside the hallway, typed in my password, walked back in, and sat down. And that was totally annoying. And, so I don't know. We need some like completely new way of authentication to solve that problem. But iPads aren't really good for privacy. iPads aren't good if you want to run Flash. In case you haven't heard. I didn't find that to be that big of a deal. I don't know. I know some people, it's like it's a huge issue for them. They can't believe it doesn't run Flash. I just didn't really notice. I don't know. Like I don't know what everyone else's experience is. We can talk about that. But so this might be a good point to open it up to everybody. What are your experiences? What things do you find you really, really enjoy the iPad for, and what things are you just totally frustrated by and find yourself leaving it? Anybody?
I only used the iPod once, and I found the keyboard to be a little difficult to get used to. Do you really not find it that limiting, or do you just get used to it after a while?
Yes. It's somewhat limiting, and it's not as good as a keyboard. I type in Dvorak. I like take typing pretty seriously. Like I had to go teach myself a whole other way to type a different keyboard layout. So like I definitely take typing pretty seriously, and I understand the benefits of having a really efficient way to do it, but it's trade-offs of things, and I just find most of the types of activities I end up doing don't involve a ton of typing. So for like typing 2 sentences, it doesn't matter, and I just go do it. And the autocorrect actually really makes a big difference there. The difference of the iPad keyboard versus the iPhone one, where it's that much bigger, makes the autocorrect actually that much better, because you're a little less likely to fat finger it and type it wrong, and then it autocorrects as you go. And so I find that's not a huge limiting factor for me. But if I'm going to be typing, if I know I'm gonna go type a full page of something, I don't do it here. That's why I go to my desktop and do it somewhere else. Other people have comments about the keyboard?
I find that you can lay it flat and have a slight incline keyboard to type a lot easier, especially in landscape mode. I find I can type really fast when I can do that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point too about modes. I never type in portrait mode. If I'm gonna be typing, I always flip it to the side and have the wide, bigger keyboard myself.
I got a human factor comment about that. So I think that the autocorrect is much more annoying on the iPad because you tend to be you have to look at the keys when you're typing on that, and you're less likely to fat finger it. So you've got pretty good accuracy, and you have to watch where you're typing, which means you're not watching what has been typed, and so it's autocorrecting stuff and garbling things that you have no idea, and then you tweeted it out to the world.
So you'd rather just turn it off?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've sent some strange tweets every once in a while.
Yeah.
With, auto-type recorrection.
So how far are we from a speech-to-text app?
There's a great app that's free called from Dragon, which is a really popular voice recognition company, and so it's a speech-to-text app. I find it works very well. It's a cloud-based, so you speak into it and it sends your text up to the cloud, translates it really quickly, and comes back to the text. And I find it works really well. If I'm stuck on my iPad or my iPhone and I have to write a long thing, I'll consider that. That's the only time it's worth it for me to go pull it out. Because it's another app, you have to go launch this other app, which is slow on the iPad, and then you have to do your thing, get your text, copy it to the clipboard, go back to where you were, and then go paste it back in again. If you use an iPad, you get used to doing this a lot. And that amount of effort, I better be doing a bunch of text. it would seem like an obvious thing that they would make a service out of that would be something built in across the OS, so that anytime you're at a keyboard you can say, no, I want to dictate instead. I can't imagine that's not that far away. There's a little bit of faith involved in the iPad. Like you can like rush over some of these things. You're like, okay, I know they're gonna fix that eventually, right? Like this can't be this way forever. So I can deal with it for a while.
Yeah, I wonder what you think about how the new colored nook will affect iPad and development of the iPad and its hardware.
I'm curious what other people think too. Like personally, I don't think it matters. I think the thing with the iPad is, and the iPhone that makes everything so powerful is the integrated experience. And so what Apple's really done is they pull all these things together, that they have the App Store and they have my data and they can sync it to my computer and they have all my media that's coming out of iTunes and all my photos and video, and all this comes together in one place. That I think is really hard for anybody else to beat. I think Android has the ability to potentially do that. The experience is nowhere near comparable at this point, but someday could. But I think that's going to be the biggest thing for me when you compare a Nook or a Kindle or something like that to an iPad. Now, I had a Kindle, and I use the Kindle app on my iPad and iPhone a lot, and I'm a huge fan of the Kindle. I think it's a great device. I don't think of it as an iPad competitor. I think if you do that, it's going to lose. It's not going to win, but people are going to buy that because they're really into reading books, and because they read. And there's a lot of people that do that, and a lot of people that read a lot. And if I was reading a lot and I was doing it every day, if I had a commute every day, I would totally, at that point, think it might be worth it to carry a separate device in a Kindle. Clearly, if you've ever tried to use this thing outside, this is not for reading on the beach. If you want to go read on the beach, you won't have a Kindle. But I think it's going to be it's a different device. You have to put it in a different class. If you put it head to head, there's no way it's going to win. Susan.
One problem I have is cutting and pasting. If I want to, I'm typing something and I want to insert my credit card information, I have to stop and typing, copying and so forth.
Yeah.
And that's very information.
Yeah, I think there's an app called Text Expander, which is trying to solve that problem, at least giving you a bunch of shortcuts to like typing short things that expand into long things. And kind of like Dropbox, they've integrated with a number of different apps. So it doesn't work with everything, but if the app has taken the time to go make it work, you get this benefit. And that's another thing to me that seems like eventually should be something that's built in. Yeah, I find that frustrating too.
So, what is it good for? Personal, I agree with you, all the things that you listed. One thing maybe I can hear you say is that I've enjoyed so much is it's so immersive. It's the user interface. As you get in there and just relax and start to do what you're wanting to do, it's because of the lack of the operating system. It's lack of the OS hoops that you have to jump through.
Because it makes you focus on one thing at a time.
Yeah, right. It
Part of
just
the trade-off.
you really get into it, right? It's really immersive. And then at work, it's great for taking notes and meetings, and of course can always VPN and go to the desktop if necessary. But it's a good form factor at work for a lot of things. If I end up having to get into, there's times when a laptop certainly is better. It's not a panacea, but for general stuff at work, it's been great because the form factor is so much more convenient. I'm curious if you're planning to talk more about potential business uses or some current use cases in business, because I think there's a ton of specific applications there that it's good for.
Yeah, well, that's maybe a good spot to move on to the next slide, but we'll loop back. I'm glad we got everybody giving some feedback, and I think we'll have a lot more opportunity for that. On the business case slide, I don't have any specific things to speak to that here, and I wouldn't say that I'm an expert at that, but I think, in general, I think we're going to see a lot of vertical applications, and I do talk about some of the things I think we need, what are the next features we need to have to really make that work, and I think at that point we're going to see a lot of vertical applications where there's going to be really things specific to doctors or to a media environment or to maybe a shared experience where you're going to somewhere physical, and this is part of it. So what's next for the iPad? I don't have any insight into Steve Jobs' master playbook or anything. This is some of these things might be obvious, some of these things might be wrong. But this is what when I got it, when I started playing it, this is what I thought was the obvious kind of next steps that are really going to make this break out even further. First of all, it needs to be multi-user. It's like your phone, it's okay that like it's my phone and you can't pick it up and use it. And I don't want you to, right? Like it's kind of a big deal to use somebody else's phone. It's not nearly, it's not like it used to be. Like it used to be you can't split your phone. It's like, oh yeah, you're gonna make a call, right? But now I'm giving you my phone, it's unlocked. It's like, okay, by the way, you've also got all my email, like, you know, access to my passwords, Evernote, like with, you know, maybe you've got, I don't know what else you've got in there, but there's a lot of information in here. I've got my Chase app, I've got all these other things. Like it's a big deal to hand someone this. It's much bigger than just giving them your keys. And the iPad makes that, it's, you know, it's the same problem, except that you have to, there are so many more cases where you want to share it. And so, you know, I have two iPads in our family, one that I use every day and one that is technically my wife's, but you know, it's kind of around the house and our kids play with it sometimes, things like that too. This is the perfect device for like, if somebody's at your house and they want to go check a web page and like, rather than letting them use your computer, it's way easier just hand them the iPad, like here, go do that here, but it's all the same kind of problems. And so it really needs to be multi-user. I should be able to just hand you the iPad and you should be able to very quickly like log into it and get your iPad, right? With like your preferences on it and your things. And you shouldn't be able to read my email or access my stuff. And that's gonna be really helpful in the living room. It's also gonna be really helpful in the kiosk, in business and other places when you wanna put iPads places so you don't have to carry them around. And so that's why I think kiosk is another thing that goes hand in hand with multi-user mode, right? So it should be that you walk up to, you know, the meeting room and right outside every room there's an iPad embedded in the wall. And if you go up to it by default, it's got the schedule for what's going on here with a little custom event app, right, that tells you what's happening here, and you can go look up what's happening in other rooms or other things. And if you really need to, you can pull up the web page and go to the Initech Austin website and look up something there. And if nobody's behind you waiting to use it, maybe you actually go check your email. Right, because you really have to go do that. And you should be able to do that anywhere with any iPad that you can just walk up to. And I think we're going to see more of those. You should have an iPad in the back of the JetBlue seat, right? Like, wouldn't that be so much better than whatever they're giving you? Like, it's cool that I have DirecTV and we can all go, watch the same thing. But what if I could, right before the plane took off, log in and have it download my music and my movies and have my email sitting there and not have to carry the device around? I think we're going to see a lot more of those. That's to me, that's an obvious place where this kind of goes, and where you start to see these everywhere. You're going to want one in the backseat of your car. Instead of putting a video thing for your kids, like they just have an iPad sitting there that they can play with, or they can do all those same things plus a whole bunch more, and it actually probably costs less. And it's interesting kind of note. We have a Chevy Tahoe. I've got two little kids, and that was like when we got it. That was like the kid mobile that we're going to keep for a long time, and we don't care if things spill and whatever. And so then we went to go put in the super duper kid package with we wanted to be able to play movies and have them do games and other things. And we put in a little kind of like remote. There's like a switch in the front. You hit a camera and like you can see on the thing what the kids are doing in back. But I pulled out and we didn't put in the video screens in the back because this was like last year, and I was just it was right before. I think it was right before the iPad came out. And I just was thinking about it. I was like it's like $2,000 to put in all this video stuff in the back of the car, and whatever you're getting is like 4-year-old technology. It's totally like out of date, and it's this vertical application, and then you install it, and you're not going to move it or change it, and you've got it for like another 5 years, right? And I just could see that I don't think the iPad was actually out yet, but it was so obvious that in the next few years we're going to have something that's smaller that you can just carry around that's going to do all those same things. And I'm really glad that we waited, and now I'm like looking for there's like things you can like put over the back of your seat to basically like hang an iPad over the back and let the kids play with it there. And I think that's going to be it's going to be cheaper and like 100 times better. And we're going to see that more and more. But I think the biggest thing that's coming that I can't tell you what it is, but that is going to really revolutionize this, and it's going to get way more people than me over the hump of laptop versus iPad. Charlie, if that's not working, don't worry about it. It's good. But is that the touch interfaces are going to improve. Like what we've got now is totally V1. We got this cool thing, and then we took a bunch of desktop apps and iPhone apps and kind of like slapped them on top of the iPad and just tried to make them work and looked for a couple cool places to put in touch. But what's going to be really revolutionary is when touch becomes the new interface, when you don't have to type as much because there's other different ways to do it. When you don't need a mouse to do your Photoshop because there's a better, more integrated way to do it that's more intuitive, that more people can do, that's easier to use, that doesn't need as much training to figure out, and that's gonna, I think that's where things are gonna really explode. And I feel like we're just starting to scratch the surface there. You see some of these things with the iPad where, like, particularly in gaming being one of the first places, where there's games that there's no interface. You just touch stuff on the screen and move it around. And those are I think some of the best games and some of the most fun. There's a game called Galcon. Anyone play Galcon? Nobody. Galcon's like one of those, it's almost like Risk. Like it's space, but you've got planets and spaceships. And just like with Risk, when you like attack one territory and you've got armies in one and they go attack the next, you've got ships that you can send from planet to planet to take over. But the way you send them is you just drag from one planet to the next, and your ships go over and attack. There's another great game called Harbor Master, which is kind of like being an air traffic controller, but you're doing it for boats. And so there's all these like boats coming onto the screen, and you have to get the boats to the right docks and then get them off, and you can't let any of the boats crash. And so whenever a boat comes on the screen, you kind of just like, you draw a line where you want its path to go. Like, you go over here, right? And then you've got all these lines going around. And when you see someone using the game, they're like, moving their fingers like, oh, like this the whole time. It's like it's a totally different experience. And I think we're going to see that way beyond gaming in other places and in other types of apps that just make it easier to do things that you used to do that maybe you would have used a keyboard for before. That's more on touch. So I got 3 little videos. This is my daughter when she was 1. She's almost just about to turn 2, and that's her playing with an iPhone. And I think you can just see in a sec. It's like she gets how it works. Like, she doesn't really know what to do with it, but this is at like 1, she understands the idea of like, I'm gonna hold this thing and I'm gonna tap on it, and she understood the basic idea of swiping. She kind of does it with her finger like this, like she's doing right there. But she understands you like move the screen, and that's just from watching us. We didn't teach her anything, and that's actually how we got her to crawl. I'm sure she would have done it anyway on her own, but when it was like she's about ready to crawl, we just put the iPhone like 6 feet away from her. Now that was it. That like got her to crawl. And the kids are just so attracted to this interface, and it's so much more intuitive. You don't have to; they just get it, and because it makes sense, and it's a people kind of thing. And I think that's why it's going to be so powerful. Interestingly enough, about 2 months ago, I took an airplane flight ride with her, and she started doing this. Right? She just assumed, because she doesn't know anything else. She doesn't know any computer that you can't touch on the screen and do stuff with. So she's like, oh, the back of the plane, right? Like, why can't I tap on it? Why can't I go to the screen? I want to play bubbles. What's going on? Yeah. So, and that wasn't staged or anything. I whipped out my phone right away, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. But she just right away. She just assumed it. And, that's the other thing to get in your head, right? Like, she's never going to use a computer. I don't think she ever will. She's 2 years old now. Like, by the time she's like 3 years from now, 5, she's just going to use iPads. She's going to be touching stuff. I don't think she's going to use a keyboard. I really don't. By the time she's 10 or 12, this is going to be everything's going to be touch interface, and she's going to think it's funny that we like learned to type. This was yesterday. Like I said, she's about 2. I just noticed she has her daddy T-shirt on. That's cute. So I handed her the iPad, and I told her to play bubbles. And so what's great actually about this example is she screwed up and she fixes it, right? So she hit the wrong thing, and she knows. She went and pressed the home button. She's like, okay, wait, now I'm going to be a little more careful. She knows which icon she's looking for. She flipped the other one. She just launched bubbles. And she knows she can go play bubbles, pop her bubbles. She usually gets bored pretty quickly, and she goes, oh, I know how to do something else. She knows how to do that. She goes, hits the home button. I'm just going to launch another game she wants to play. This one this thing launched, and it's a shareware thing. You have to press a button to play it. She pressed the wrong button. She knows that. She's going to do it again. She's just really careful because it's hard for her to tap on stuff, but she taps on the right one. And this time, she's going to click the right one. It's hard. She got it. And now actually she just tapped something else too. She made it go away. And in a second there, there we go. She'll start using the little game. So it's like, you don't teach her anything. She just knows it. She sees it, and she can learn just from watching. It's so intuitive, right? And I think we're gonna see so much more of that. That's gonna extend across a lot of things, and it's gonna make computers a lot more accessible to more people. So, you asked what's gonna happen in business. I think one, the touch interfaces are going to make this much more attractive. Just like it's easier for little kids, it's going to be easier for everybody. Like think of all the business applications where you're trying to teach people to use computers and to do things with them when that's not really what they want to do. They're trying to do something else. They're trying to do their job. And I think this is going to open up a lot of doors there. And I think it's, you know, I'm certainly not the first one to say it, but it's amazing how quickly it's already happening, how much it's already infiltrating business, which I don't think is what anyone expected. They thought this was going to be a consumer device and like, oh, businesses won't even let you use this because it's not secure, because it doesn't do whatever. But everybody wanted to have it. It's like it's the form factor they want to have in front of them. And it's not a fad. It's not like a shiny new object that like everyone's got. No, like this is what everyone's going to want to keep wanting to do. And I think it's just going to get bigger and bigger. So this whole presentation was made on my iPad. I'm presenting it off an iPad. I did it in Keynote, which is their Mac presentation software. When I wanted to put a photo in, I could go find it on the internet and get it onto my thing. When I had those videos, I transferred those onto the iPad using a little photo adapter that'll get it off like your camera, and then just in Keynote, just like embed them right in. All the transitions, everything like that. So like they say it's not a content creation tool. Well, when it first came out, it wasn't really. It's going to become more and more of one because we're coming up with better and better ways to do it, to ways to get around the keyboard that are often going to be better options. And so I think that that's part of a testament to what's happening with it. And that's about what I had for the presentation. But we'd love to open up to more questions. We got about 20 minutes, so we can end a little bit early. But we can I'll just sit here and talk about iPad, which from the 10 hands raised, I guess we will.
The video, are you using a video out cable now?
Yeah, so I have a cable that goes the iPod connector to video out. You get off the Apple's website, and then that just lets you.
There's one that gives you the composite video and audio. And I was looking, and they have a chipset, and some of them won't go with the older level software, and some of them say, so what software version is that? And is there a problem with those cables not working with
I've never heard of any problems. Yeah, I haven't used it. I've used it 20 times, like not a million times, but it's been really easy for me. I've never had any of the issues with like getting it to recognize the projector or anything like that.
That one goes to VGA then.
Yeah, this is VGA.
But the other one goes to composite. Is there any like high def coming, like going to HDMI?
Not that I know of. It's one of those things. I'm sure it's just a matter of time. Like I'm sure there will be those options, but not right now. There's another app I just got called Expedition, and it's it makes it easier to show other types of media on a projector too. So for example, right now with Safari, if I were to pull up a web page, you wouldn't see it up here. But there's an app. Expedition that will bring up the web, and then you can show PDFs, you can show a lot of other things here. And so I can come here, hit another web page. Pull it up. So, it's one of those things, like when it first came out, you couldn't do that, now there's an app for that, right? And I gotta imagine more of these things should be built in. Like most of the default apps don't export to video out, but I think over time,
is it high def video? Is it?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I assume it's regular VGA. Go way in the back. Start there, and we'll work our way over.
So I wanted to clarify something you said. So you're talking about your daughter's using the iPad now, and you're saying that she's not going to be using a computer, but really, she's going to be using tons of computers. She's just not going to be using old school.
You're right. I mean, she's not going to be using. I think she'll be using touch interfaces. Is what I really meant to say.
So, to follow up actually on that question, I've got one for the crowd and one for you. I'd love to hear you riff on what you see as input mechanisms for textual information in the future. I personally use a swiping keyboard, and the question for the crowd would be how many people here are familiar with or use the swiping keyboards, and then I'd like to hear what you think about what is going to be there.
So how many people use swipe on Android? I think 5 or 6. How many people use Android? Okay, so maybe like a third of the people using Android, it looks like, have swipe. If you're not familiar with swipe, swipes basically picture your normal keyboard, but instead of tapping on letters one at a time, you kind of drag between them the ones you want, and it figures out the same kind of thing, and it seems to be just a faster, less error-prone way to do it that people really like. It's not available for the iPhone right now.
Actually, there is an app that does that.
But it's not. Sorry. Maybe it'll do it outside. It's kind of like the speech recognition at that point. You got to go to some other app, type your text, copy it, go back to where you want to paste it, or something like that. On Android, it's really nice because it's integrated into the keyboard. So in any app that you're in, you can go use it. I don't think I know the answer to like what's next. Voice recognition is something that a lot of people point towards, and I think that will get better and better. It seems like we've still got some big hurdles to get over there before it really gets really useful. But we're seeing apps like Siri and others that really leverage voice recognition as part of what they're trying to do. I think the dictation software that I use is pretty effective. And I don't claim to have a crystal ball, but my gut is they're going to find ways that you don't have to input as much text. It's not that they're going to find a better way to input lots of text. It's just you won't have to input as much text. It will figure out the text for you. It will pull it from somewhere else really easily. It will, I don't know. Maybe it'll be some chip you implant in your head. And you just think the text, but I just think you're not going to have to enter as much, and that's what's harder to predict. I don't know how they're going to do that, but that's the things I'm seeing. It's just like I'm just not typing stuff anymore. I'm pulling in stuff from other ways or for other things. Was there one more back there on the left?
You mentioned multi-user, and this is something I've been thinking about. Do you think that multi-user on the iPad will be in the cloud format or in more of in-device profile?
I'm 100% certain it'll be in the cloud. Again, I don't actually have a crystal ball. I'm not talking to Steve Jobs, but like I can't imagine it would be anything but in the cloud.
You were talking about the cable and the video out. Currently with the VGA cable, the only thing between video out is the exposition, of course, slideshows and video. We did talk about jailbreaking, but there is a jailbreak app that does an excellent job of letting you everything video out. I use mine for teaching, and that's why I need to have that capability. I think it's fantastic. The other thing that you were talking about is other. I think the other apps haven't really made good use of the interface, except for like Flipboard and the ABC
Flipboard.
News app are two great examples. And they also do something about multitasking because they give you the ability to go out to the web and see web pages without needing the app. And then when you close that web page, you're still in your app.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think those are good answers. I love Flipboard. If you guys haven't seen it, Flipboard's it basically makes they're trying to do is make a newspaper style or a magazine style format out of your social media. So you get a book you can flip through, but it's pulling the content from Twitter and Facebook and other places. So you see you're looking at photos that you would have seen on Facebook or comments and status updates and things. And it's really great. Can you say what you liked about the ABC News app?
Oh, it's great. Well,
or ABC app?
It's the same in the same kind of way that it's all touch. It's a globe that you spin around, you find the story, you tap it once, you get more detail, and then when you tap it again, you go to the full web page detail. You can read it, you can play the video if you want, and then but you all stay within the app the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
So you can then when you back out of it, you're still in the app. You look along with that.
Another app that I recently got just in the past few, I think it just came out like yesterday, the day before, is called Amazon Window Shopper. And I don't know that it's like revolutionary in making use of the touch interface, but it made me buy a lot of stuff really fast. It basically just gives you this big grid of it's like going down, you can scroll down to see more stuff, and you're seeing like a grid of images of things you might want to buy. And across the columns are all categories, just like you'd see at the top tabs at the old Amazon, where it was like books, electronics, blah blah. So you see like first one's like recommended, just like things they're recommending for you. And it's like books, electronics, toys, kids, clothing, blah 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 goes across. And it's all stuff they're recommending, and you end up scrolling in either direction and just kind of wandering through it, where you can like find a column you're interested in, just keep going down, and you just keep seeing more stuff and more, or you can go across to get more differentiated type things. And then if you see anything you like, you click on it and it zooms up. And then of course integrated with their one-click shopping. I mean, it's like you're just like you look at it and you're like buy, and you're done. And then you're like look at the next thing, buy, you're done. Like I swear I bought 5 things in 2 minutes. It was just like boom, 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 boom. I mean, not all they weren't expensive things, but really, I think, taking advantage of the new interface. Did you have something to say?
Daughters, do you do that?
Don't let your daughter watch
Yeah,
it.
Right.
exactly. That's why we need the multi-user.
Well, I also think Pulse is an extraordinary application. It's a news application. It works very much the same way. You're not all familiar with it. You can choose as many news sources as you want, and they'll be featured stories across. People up
This is
and down.
Pulse is a similar news type application.
It's the best that I've seen. Deals well with the RSS feeds, the truncated stories, and you still stay in the app even though you sometimes have to go out. It's a perfect app, and it's very touchy.
Yeah, one other one that reminds me of, in a different set, there's a great search app, a very different take on mapping and search called Yahoo Sketch. Has anybody seen that? So Yahoo Sketch, it's like you see a map, but instead of you typing something to search for it, you just draw on the map like a circle or a shape around the area you care about. So like if I'm downtown where I work and I want to look for somewhere to go to eat for lunch, I can really easily sketch out like kind of like, you know, like Lamar to 35 and downtown, like the area like I'd be willing to go to. And so you just draw the circle and then just pops up, here's all the stuff that's there. You know, kind of like here are the interesting search results within that little sketch. But the whole search is started by you circling what you want.
It's a great travel app.
Yeah, yeah. So, Orange, way back?
Where do you see any of the developments going toward the assistive technologies arena?
You know, that's another place I wouldn't claim to be an expert. I don't know a ton about that, but it would seem like this would be really helpful there because the same things that make using the device more intuitive and easier and don't require things like a keyboard and a mouse, which can be very precise but maybe not as easy to use. It would seem like they would make all those things work better too. And it would seem like, you know, being more accessible, being easier, spending less time figuring out how the computer works and more whatever you're trying to do would be really beneficial in that area. Did you have other thoughts about it?
Well, I'm about to purchase one for my systems analyst to play with. I work for Goodwill, and so we serve people with disabilities, and so we're going to explore some areas where we might be able to apply it. And for people with limited mobility or with needing speech recognition, things like that. So.
Yeah, and particularly the larger form factor. You know, like I don't think my daughter would do very well with an iPad, with an iPhone right now. I mean, she does use it, and she'll take it from us, and she does do it. But it's much harder because she doesn't have the fine motor skills, and so she, you know, it's just harder for her to tap on things and get them right. Whereas the iPad is, you know, big enough that she has a little more leeway. Up front.
You want to comment on iPad as a TV universal remote, maybe with a camera on it for video conference?
Sure. Again, you know, everybody feel free to comment because this is I'm not an iPad expert or anything. This is all just, you know, personal experience, which I'm sure you guys all have as well. I do use it as a remote. Actually, my original iPhone, that you know, the first one I ever got, sits by my bedside. I think it's another great example of convergence. I remember like 10 years ago we used to debate about convergence. You know, are you going to have one device that does everything, or are you going to have a really good phone and a really good camera? And like I think that debate's over. Like we're going to have convergence. It's all going to be in your phone. And the example of that is the phone that now sits by my bedside has replaced my alarm clock, the phone, my remote control for the TV, a place to like write down notes or things like that. Obviously a computer, right? Because sometimes I check my email or Twitter or things like that from there. It controls our music system, which is Sonos, so another type. You know, it's multiple remotes. It's like a universal remote. And then one of the things we watch the most is an Apple TV, and so it does, you know, it has a great remote app for the phone, and then the iPad does the same thing. You know, interestingly enough, as a remote, I find we use the phone more. Yeah, I mean, they both can do all the same things, but it's like when you're watching TV or you're doing something, if you can, you'd rather have something smaller.
What I